what we do as humans is we say what we think we need, but it's our responsibility as practitioners to be like, what do you really need? And what I know people really want right away is to feel better. And so I've kind of rearranged my life around just trying to help people feel better immediately based on the symptoms they're coming in with, because symptoms tell a pretty dang big story. And I think probably one of the biggest issues in our medical space it's still a big issue, is overemphasizing labs and diagnostics before symptoms.
Welcome to Hopeful and Wholesome, the show where ambitious women come home to their bodies. I'm your host, Hope Pedraza, and I'm a functional practitioner, human design guide, and expert on all things energy, and your partner in decoding the language of your body. This is your space to reconnect with your body's wisdom, reclaim your energy, and rise into alignment in your health, your business, and your life. Because thriving isn't about pushing harder, it's about learning to listen deeper. So let's dive in, because your next breakthrough starts right now. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show my friend Christa Biegler. She is an award-winning dietitian and root cause nutritionist and the owner of Less Stress Life Nutrition. She helps people resolve food sensitivities, inflammation, and eczema without unnecessary restriction, endless supplementation, or costly testing. And really, that's what we're diving into today. We're talking about how to repair from chronic and unconscious stress as a high achiever, but we're really looking at it from the perspective of how do we do this without all of the restrictions, all the gajillions of dollars of supplementation that we're told that we need, or the $5,000 worth of testing that we're told that we need. And really what it looks like, what it means when we're reacting to everything, and what happens when our system is overloaded, and a lot of times on an unconscious level, because that's typically how it happens with high achieving women. And when we feel like we're sensitive to everything, we're reacting to everything, and we think, oh, we just need more diets and more supplements. We're talking about how to get off of that whole like merry-go-round cycle of all the things. And Christa has such a wealth of knowledge about this, and this is such an informative conversation. So get ready to take some notes and let's jump in. All right, y'all. I'm here with Christa, and thank you for being here with us today, Christa. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this as well, because we got to meet maybe a month ago or something. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this doesn't happen as much as I wish it was, but we're pretty aligned in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. Same. And as I mentioned in the intro, we are aligned in so many things, and we have a similar approach to things, and how we are trying to help women not be stuck in the endless restrictions and supplementation and paying a gajillion dollars for labs and all that. Like I like that that's your perspective too. And I would love just to start with your own experience. You are a registered dietitian, and I would love to know kind of your journey here, because yes, you're a registered dietitian, but you also don't teach and approach things as a lot of other like traditional RDs. So I would love to hear kind of your journey on that.
Yeah. I was actually on a ski lift last week with my uncle, who's a surgeon. And when you're in surgery, you're doing your job, right? It's like very black and white is how I perceive it. And you're not necessarily, he's definitely doing consults with people, but it's a real different audience, right? And so I was having a little bit of a frank conversation, because he got into CrossFit and some other things a handful of years ago, and it started to shift his perspective a little bit. And that's how I didn't know this story, but he'd gotten into that because he'd had some like back pain, and someone said, have you tried CrossFit? And it was essentially like stretching that got him. And so it's so interesting how we shift and change, right? It's either through inspiration or desperation. And so usually we find different ways because we're like, this isn't great. And so when I went into private practice, and similarly to that, to just bridge, when I went into private practice for many years, maybe 30% of my clients were health professionals, actually, because that was an audience that knew that there was a better option, but they just weren't getting a better option. And I think that's a lot of our clients in general. And so to summarize my journey-ish I've been a registered dietitian for about 15 years. But in the last 10 years, I've been in private practice. Before that, I was in a really clinical setting with pretty sick people, which is typically how conventional setting is. But I was doing a lot of different blood work, et cetera. I mean, you learn through every single experience. When I transitioned into private practice, I had essentially 3 different health crisis or healing experiences that I would mark as big events over the last 10 years. The first one was at the beginning of that private practice. I woke up one morning broken out in a rash, and I created more food reactions and sensitivities for myself. I had gotten into doing food sensitivity testing and protocols. There's absolutely right and wrong ways to do that, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Which is a whole hour or two conversation. It doesn't have to be, right? But there's essentially it is based on physiology. We have some issues with, there's not a unanimous way to do it. And to be perfectly honest, it's not even as a popular approach as it was probably back, 2015 to 2020. It was still pretty popular, I would say, overall. But that experience was, I actually ended up in a more stressed state. Like I was definitely having I created more food reactions than I started with as a result of restricting my diet, is the bottom line. The other thing was with that part of the story was, I had a lot of whispers. I was like a normal average human at that moment in time where like I had a lot of whispers that I didn't realize or didn't catch until they started yelling at me or screaming at me, right? Because the body is always trying to help you and protect you and support you. And so your symptoms will look different for different reasons, a genetic predisposition, and then it's got to manifest into more things. And again, we usually change from desperation. And when you have a rash showing up on your face and your neck, desperation kicks in really quickly. So like most normal people, I wanted someone else to take care of this for me, to heal me. And I really struggled to find anyone who could put together those pieces. It was a little bit haphazard, very shallow toolboxes. And so I kind of had to dig in and crawl out of essentially a big hole I dug myself around really some like basic foundational immune, gut health, drainage, essentially like getting my physiology back to a more functional and optimal state. And that is a really big through line, is what is going on in your body, what is out of range or out of balance in your physiology. So I'll quickly summarize these next two. The next time I had a big health thing or crisis was somewhere around 2017, 2018. Doesn't seem like that much farther along, right? After 2015, but it was then I was working for a celebrity influencer, and we were doing a program that had a lot of fasting components. I mean, we were at the cusp of that conversation at that time. And so like most normal humans, we start out with good intentions. And before you know it, you're having coffee for breakfast and lunch and not nourishing. This happens to people all the time. We do something with the right intentions and it kind of falls apart because you get busy and you're doing other things, and caring for yourself before taking care of everyone else's needs is not the priority typically. And so what happened next was I trashed my stress hormones overall. And this is a really common scenario with a lot of high achievers. And we're super good at acting like everything is fine. Which makes it almost harder, because I have sort of a rule that you don't tell people they have a problem that they don't think that they have. It just doesn't work. It doesn't align, right? And so you have to kind of go about it from a different way. Like, what was this looking like? I was too tired to pick up the house or to do the dishes with young kids. I was just there are many, many symptoms that can be there, but the thing about a high achiever is sometimes we are like, I think I feel fine. And it was so funny because I had a Dutch test and it showed for adrenal function. I was like, oh, that's weird. I don't feel bad. And then I had a HTMA and it showed this and I was like, oh, weird. My other test had just showed that too. Right. But I was kind of in a denial. But what it may have looked like more regularly for a longer amount of time was like reactivity, right? Like thinking about work all the time and not being able to shut that off, right? And I definitely had to support the energy. I think I was definitely in denial about what energy looked like and having really sustainable energy. But I think the other thing that was going on was it makes you more predisposed or more likely to relapse, because if your stress hormones are trashed, your thyroid is often sluggish. And when that's sluggish, it'll slow down your gut motility and create some of those same problems that you maybe had before. So it might look like bloating and things like that after eating, or just like continuing to have like little food reactions, which of course on the outside, you're such a healthy person, you are going to be adjusting your diet, making sure it's like the best possible, right? We're high achievers. So that was kind of, I was just trying to make that a little bit relatable. It's like, how did it look and what were some of the challenges around that one? So I worked to restore function to my stress hormones, which I think is always an ongoing thing in general. I think like you make massive strides and you feel much better. And then we still have to be cognizant of that. And then the most recent experience, I don't know if that was as much of a healing crisis, but really it was in the last couple of years, I really went through more emotional and energetic work, right? That's the kind of stuff that essentially your thoughts, feelings, etc., run the biochemistry in your body. And so when you've got that, those will be the soundtrack of stress in the background of your mind. And so until we get to that point, we are going to see some things show up. And so how this was looking in practice for me was probably in about 2020, I started running mineral analysis on people. I was inspired after a girls' trip to Texas, actually, to do HTMA because I was sick of, I really wanted like synergistic, sustainable nutrition that was really food-based so we could do less supplements and get people to not be like, okay, now these are your deficiencies. Now these are your deficiencies. We wanted to like pull it together for a more sustainable, synergistic outcome. And so I started doing that with everyone in 2020. And I did that up until last year. Now it's like, I don't require it always. And that's okay. You know, it's like not here. It doesn't really, it's neither here nor there. It was just because I saw so many of the same patterns over and over and over. And the pattern I saw that I'm sure you see was that we have really trashed. And I loved it because for an economical price point. So I was talking about the Dutch test, which is dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. And that is sort of our, I'll call it the gold standard for hormone testing in functional medicine, aside from some blood testing. It's especially amazing for anyone who might have a female cancer history in their family because it's going to show how you're processing estrogen, but there are some limitations to the adrenal side. For example, if your liver is congested, it's going to alter what the metabolized or long-term cortisol looks like on that test. And if you have any abdominal adiposity or belly fat, which can happen more so at different ages than others, it's also going to skew it. So I liked moving to that HTMA because it more appropriately and accurately represented what I was seeing in front of me. Because I could get a woman who was totally adrenal trashed, like she had all the signs and symptoms, but the Dutch test wouldn't necessarily confirm that because of maybe she'd had a little bit of additional abdominal, like belly fat that had developed as she went into perimenopause and then menopause. And so it was skewing it. And you know what sucks, Hope, is when your test doesn't back up how you feel. Mm-hmm. No one likes that, right? And so, and the other thing about doing the Dutch test is that I'm off on a tangent. Hopefully it's good. But the problem with doing that test, and it's a good test, and it's an amazing test, and it's great people that run the company. It's actually probably one of the coolest companies. But then the negative is that unless you are only separating off the adrenal and cortisol portion, you really have to, I don't do, because it's like a much better deal to do the whole shebang, right? The whole package. Then you have to really arrange it around your menstrual cycle. So, you know, I mention all this because people come in and say, I want to test my hormones. And it's like, well, do you know what that means? You know, and what the hierarchy of that could be. And essentially what we do as humans is we say what we think we need, but it's our responsibility as practitioners to be like, what do you really need? And what I know people really want right away is to feel better. And so I've kind of rearranged my life around just trying to help people feel better immediately based on the symptoms they're coming in with, because symptoms tell a pretty dang big story. And I think probably one of the biggest issues in our medical space it's still a big issue, is overemphasizing labs and diagnostics before symptoms. And when we're considering evidence-based medicine, it is the research, like what's clinically research appropriate, the clinician experience, and the client experience. And when we combine all those, then we get this beautiful trifecta of what's actually happening. So that's why one of my values is like meeting someone where they are. But that was kind of a little bit of a meandering way, but hopefully I just saw the opportunity. I was talking about it and I knew that we could get into these deep, nerdy side pockets. And so I just went ahead and threw them in there. So hopefully that was helpful and useful, but I guess there is a bow to wrap it with. The inner healing stuff I found essential because I missed this in the conversation. But as I was doing all of those mineral analysis and seeing the essential, I call it fried adrenals and sluggish thyroid, you could be doing the right things to support that and to fix that. You could be feeling better. But people, if they did a retest too soon, they would still not see those needles moving as much. And as an achiever, you do not like that. You want to see a test, do the thing, see the test change. Even now, if the test doesn't change enough, then it invalidates a high achiever's lived experience often, right? It's like, oh, well, this better feeling that I'm feeling is somehow now invalidated because the test didn't move enough. And what I was seeing was that if you don't change how you're processing the physiology of stress in your body, which is a problem for high achievers, because as in my story, I was like, I think I'm fine. But I was really talking fast all day long to my clients all day long. And that was being read by stress as my body. It was really as simple as that. It wasn't the only thing, of course, but it was like, that's how it was really projecting on a daily basis. And I would have had a hard time being aware of this until it started to shift and I could feel it. And I was like, oh, this is different. I'm getting the same amount done, right? But I don't have to go through it as quickly. I don't have to jam 150 pounds of stuff into a 50-pound bag every hour. Right?
Yeah. That's
So I share
true.
that because I hope that like this is the nuance. This is the beauty of the long form conversation here is like, hey, what you're wanting is kind of stuck in the gray area, right? It's not always being picked up by a lot of labs. And so there's some context and layers here. But I will offer to you, it's like, it can be as simple as being really honest and aware with those symptoms, right? And the basics is also, it's really just supporting your physiology. It's supporting your body to work the way it's intended. It's just helping it, give it the resources to function optimally, right? And when we don't do that, then symptoms start to develop, right? And when symptoms develop, they continue to develop and they continue to get louder the more we are ignoring the small signs. So when we get better at finding those smaller signs, we get to this beautiful thing long term where we're resolved and we can bring things back into balance faster in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. That was very informative. And I think it's helpful to hear, especially just from an expert's experience, right? Like what this looks like and what the healing journey looks like, and that it's not as, black and white as we would like it to be sometimes. But you mentioned in there, and I wanted to pick up on this there. You mentioned how, we as high achieving women, we just kind of brush these things off, like these things you were experiencing. And I think we are really good at that. And then sometimes I feel like I have clients sometimes where it's like, we do the labs and all the things. It's like, oh, I had no idea. Like this is showing up. And like, oh, I had no idea. And I'm like, no, you did have an idea. You just chose not to look at it, right? You just chose not to pay attention to the signs. What would you say are some of like the early red flags that we probably brush off most often that are signs that are like, hey, like, let's pay attention to this before your body's screaming at you?
Yeah.
Hey, y'all, we'll get right back to the episode. But first, let me ask you this. You've built a vision that others admire. And you've built something that you're really proud of. But behind the scenes, your body feels like it's lagging behind. It just can't quite catch up to your brilliance and your mission that you have. That late night second wind, the foggy mornings, the hormone shifts, the endless push and forcing. You can't strategize your way out of that. And you already know you don't need more supplements. You don't need another supplement stack. You also don't need another side hustle disguised as self-care, because nobody wants to have their health as a side hustle. This is about recalibrating your entire ecosystem. And that's why I created the Quantum Reset, a premium 3-month high-touch healing experience for visionary women who are ready to feel as powerful in their bodies as they do in their business. Inside, we decode your nervous system, your minerals, your hormones. We read your labs like the sacred text that it is, so we have actual answers. And then we pair that with deep energetic recalibration, subconscious release. We use gene keys, we use human design, and true embodied healing. This isn't about fixing burnout, because that's not what we're doing here. This is about becoming the woman whose body is powerful, whose body is completely electric, whose energy, clarity, radiance finally matches the size of her mission. If you know your success isn't meant to cost you your vitality, and you're ready for a science-backed, spirit-led reset, then the Quantum Reset is your invitation. So check the link in the show notes or send me a message on Instagram, and let's bring your body back online with your brilliance. Now, let's get back to the show.
Well, that's hard in some ways because it's all over the place. So I'm going to just audibly go through a list of symptoms that may show up as the thyroid starts to not feel as amazing. And hopefully we'll get some. we'll let you pick them out. I don't know if I just said a thyroid or adrenals, but I'll do both, because both of those, and to me, it's a hierarchy, like medically. And I want to acknowledge this for a moment too, just because sometimes when I say certain things, we have stereotypes of what that means. Because I hate to even use the word thyroid sometimes without much context, because people would say, oh, I had my thyroid checked. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't really mean too much. What I like is when we can catch things before they show up on blood testing. So that's kind of where I've established as well. And I used to be just the same as everyone else. I used to think like, oh, of course the doctor has this covered, like, because that should be a normal thing that's being tested. One, it's not common to be tested. Two, there's not testing, what they're testing first. A TSH is not even a thyroid hormone. It's a thyroid stimulating hormone. It's essentially an alarm clock to go do the rest of the process. And then there's a whole nother process. And then often when people ask for a full thyroid panel, they get 2 markers instead of probably 5 or 6 that they need. And then once the labs are off, it's fairly significant. There's fairly significant cellular and tissue change that has happened. So when you can catch it earlier with symptoms, it's better. So actually since I'm jabbering about thyroid, I'll start with those symptoms. I think these are ones that move people to action pretty quickly. So the hallmarks of sluggish thyroid would be hair loss, feeling cold extremities. So, and I'll say, like, I was able at some point in this journey to identify, when I had a more stressful week, it seemed like I was losing more hair, and it seemed that my hands and feet had less optimal circulation. Now, when you're full blown severe thyroid, usually you're like super cold, very chilled to the bone. The main point here with thyroid is it's challenge to control body temperature overall. And when thyroid is sluggish, generally the metabolic rate is slightly slower. Body temp is slightly, just a touch lower. So the hallmarks would be hair loss, cold extremities, and then fatigue. The tricky thing about fatigue is it's so subjective, right? And so I'll give you some parameters and biomarkers for that regardless. And these do overflow into adrenal stress function as well, overall, because there's a way that this should happen. If you aren't waking up with great energy, like you don't want to kind of jump out of bed and feel great, or cortisol awakening response, which should spike, 30 to at most 60 minutes after waking, might be a little bit low. Like there's some opportunity. So that's actually for me at this point in my life, if I'm feeling sluggish in the morning, I know that there's a little bit of something I can do to like love and support myself and all my systems. And so that one's a kind of a big one. That one's just something I figured out, but I think it's really subtle. It's like, hey, do I struggle to get out of bed in the morning? Then there might be something going on there. So, but anyway, fatigue is such a dramatic subjective thing because it's not like, I need a nap in the afternoon, but it's like I feel too tired to deal with my kids' questions or picking up or finishing the dishes. Like it feels kind of exhausting to do. It feels like there's a lot of mental load there, right? Okay, so continuing on with sluggish thyroid, some other ones that are really good but very often overlooked would be dry skin and dry hair. Are really big ones, as well as increased predisposition to fungal symptoms. So if you're seeing recurrent fungal symptoms, usually sluggish thyroid is a piece of the puzzle. And there's many reasons because everything is pretty tied together regardless. And then the other one that's big for relapse this is why I teach this part of it in supporting this system is because of that sluggish motility as well. You're going to have a little bit of increased susceptibility to constipation, but it may just look like feeling more bloated. I would say that a really subtle one with thyroid also is people describe feeling, and this is not my word, but I've heard so many people say it, fluffy. And they would not say necessarily that, and I don't know, maybe it's similar to like that bloating that kind of happens the week before your period, which is you can improve, but it's not completely abnormal to see a little bit of that because of the shift of hormones. I would describe it a little bit like that, but it's like you're wearing the same pants, but one day they are tighter than a different time, right? Mm. And it's essentially you're going to have a little bit more you may struggle a little bit more with inflammatory water weight, and it's just one reason, but the thyroid might be more sluggish. Now, in the last year, the internet made a very popular new term called cortisol face.
Yes.
And I might argue that it feels more like sluggish thyroid to me to have a round face. It's actually more typical with that. Now, I don't really care what the internet calls it. It's fine with me because it's just increasing awareness around something that didn't really have much awareness before. And cortisol is simply a hormone that is essential for the body to make, and it comes from the adrenals. And the adrenals are next to the kidneys, and they're kind of like they are underappreciated. And I would always say, don't expect your doctor to know much about it because our options conventionally are that you're pretty much dead before we recognize an issue with adrenals. So that's really, truly what that looks like in my opinion. So that was a few thyroid symptoms. Hopefully that was an okay one. I don't know. There's probably many more I missed, of course, but those are the big ones that I see showing up all the time. Then with adrenal symptoms, they're going to be like, there can be an overlap completely because I think if your adrenals are on the struggle bus. So remember we were just talking about cortisol. Cortisol is essential. So if your body's not making, it's not like you're trying to reduce it to nothing. You're going to feel exhausted. And that actually is kind of what happens. Is that it's supposed to have a peak and then a valley. Mm-hmm. Well, valley it's more of a slow decline until it bottoms out at bedtime. So you should be able to sleep at that point. And so it's more of a Goldilocks, like at what point is it optimal and then drops off. And so anyway, cortisol is, I think of it like this. I kind of think of it like hitting the gas pedal in the car. And when we're speeding in life, like my fast talking or running from appointment to appointment to appointment or thing to thing to thing, as we very often are doing, or just putting everyone's, like making sure we are doing everything. That's kind of speeding through life. So when you're speeding in real life, in a car, you're using up more fuel or energy. Similarly, in your body, you're using up more fuel, energy, nutrients, etc. And I think of the cortisol being the speedometer. And so it's going high until you run out of gas, and then it goes into the reserve tank, right? Always the car's trying to get us the last little bit of the way, but a lot of us are running on reserve tank, unfortunately, because you'll be dead if you can't make cortisol. So the body's going to take away resources from other things and put it toward making the cortisol reserves that it needs to, because it's essential, because it's our survival mechanism. So it's got to be able to run from the bear or whatever you perceive is the threat, the job, the traffic, the coworker, spouse, the family, like whatever it is, whatever the current bear or tiger is that you must survive against. You need to have some cortisol to activate you. And I think this is where high achievers are challenged, is because you can recruit adrenaline and cortisol, right? Even in this reserve tank state. And so because we're so good at recruiting the energy we need to do it, we've done it for so long, so often, and we kind of like ignored other signs and signals, that I think that's why we're like, oh, it's kind of weird to think that, oh, this is shot, because I seem to be operating acceptably, right? At least at this baseline. Okay, so I was talking about adrenal physiology, and I was just going to talk about some symptoms with it. And I'm hoping I hit on the simple ones. I know you asked a great question, but I was struggling to come up with the answer. I wanted to be, my nature is to be comprehensive. And so with adrenal symptoms, it will look like fatigue. Some of the more severe ones might be, it's going to impact. So there's a hormone made by the adrenals that will kind of be the bumpers for your blood sugar. And so like imagine being at a bowling alley and the bumpers are up, it kind of like will fill that in and support you. So if your adrenals if you're running on a reserve tank, you're not going to produce the more non-essential hormones as well. So if you're the kind of girl who needs to pack a bunch of snacks and you need to eat every few hours, there's a pretty decent sign that this blood sugar is wonky, and it may be this hormone is not being produced well enough. And generally with adrenals, there's a lot of underfeeding that happens with adrenals. So that's why fasting had trashed my adrenals and thyroid, because I had pushed it too far, right? I pushed it past the point of, well, what is that type of stress? Hermetic stress, right? Where it's like good for you, right? Kind of like cold plunging or whatever. But when you're already in a stress state, it's not really that helpful. It's more like, what in the hell are you doing is what your body is really saying. And so, okay, so we talked a little bit about fatigue. We talked about this blood sugar kind of issue because you're running out of this one hormone. So essentially it's going to look like you need to pack a lot of snacks along. And that was me a lot in life. And there's probably some other blood sugar implications there. Some other ones would be feeling lightheaded if you stood up really quickly. Now, this was really subtle for me. Like it would have been really easy for me to ignore this. But let's say you like get out of bed pretty quickly and you're just like, ooh, a little lightheaded for a moment. That's one as well because of another hormone that is being produced by the adrenals that may go down. Let's see. Another one, a more simple one would be craving salt, but even kind of craving sweets and sugar after a stressful day helps you blunt the cortisol. So that can be a natural biochemical response as well that may sort of wake you up to be like, and it's okay. It's not like it's not like there's something wrong with you. Actually, if I've had a stressful day, the best thing I can do is acknowledge it and make myself a really lovely meal with pasta or rice or something that's really nice. And in fact, that's actually like from a circadian rhythm standpoint, it works really nicely in the evening, as long as you can digest and absorb it, right? Which is a whole different thing that can be thwarted a little bit because of those. I was talking about the thyroid earlier. So digestion, we don't always digest as well as we think we do, I would say. So with adrenal stuff, so fatigue, I would say probably waking up without energy or just having kind of irregular, like if you crash after meals, that's possible. I mean, it could be other stuff too. That might be one. Just like feeling like you need snacks, feeling shaky between meals, same thing, right? And then craving salt, especially. But also if you crave carbs, after a stressful day, again, it's not a problem. It's like your body's like, please give me this. I need it for refueling type thing. Those are all some, I was trying to think of like the easy ones or like the simpler ones or the real significant red flags with adrenal. And of course, there's many more. Even slow healing. So, but if you haven't had fast healing, you won't know what slow healing is, right? So if you like get a cut, scrape, or like you get a acne, but it takes like 2 weeks to heal, that's delayed healing, right? And that's just related to the fact that overall the hormones and nutrient stores might be low. And again, the adrenal, it's like, I kind of start with like supporting that and putting that back together because it helps everything else work better when you do that. So hopefully that helped. And feel free to like chime in whatever you're thinking that I totally missed.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really good comprehensive list. And I do think that the adrenal symptoms and the thyroid symptoms are probably like the most prevalent and the most like blatantly obvious, like you're recognizing these things in your body. And all of these things that you're talking about, and I think this is to your point, why so many of us just brush these things off. Most of these things, they don't necessarily like, yes, they're annoying and they're, they poke at you, but like you can still function, right? Like I can still function through my day with all these things you're talking about, which is why it's so easy to brush these off and be like,
it's tricky.
I can just keep going because I don't need to.
Yeah. And there's like so many layers to it. I think because we have such a culture around rushing. And so I was just reading something the other day about someone going on a retreat and wanting to rest, but struggling to do so. And so needing to like go stream something or scroll because those are also nervous system responses. So just not being able to sit with yourself in silence, there's a signal, like there's some dysregulation there, which is not really directly the adrenal thyroid yet, but that nervous system response is affecting that. So it's all super connected. And it's why often we don't resolve the way we think we should. Because especially, of course, when we have physical symptoms, we go to treat our physical body, but there are some other pieces to the physical body, right? Nervous system regulation that absolutely make a big difference when trying to heal for the long haul. I had a client not too long ago say something like, I used to think mold was kind of like hocus pocus because you just need to do nervous system work, which was kind of cute and great that she thought she went to nervous system work first. And she had like major exposure as a kid. And then she said later, she's like, oh, then I realized it's like not one or the other. It's both and, right? And so you can support, it's sort of like things happen, things fall apart. And there is this health triad where we can support multiple angles. We can support the nutritional chemical, right? The minerals and other things filling those in. And there's so many ways to do that. And the way you and I do that is really synergistic, right? It's because we have probably had our own versions of why we came to that because we wanted something sustainable, synergistic. And then we've got the emotional, energetic piece, which is part with nervous system regulation. And then we've got, whatever else, right? What's in the environment? Who are we surrounding ourselves? All those other pieces as well. So I think any symptom you can look at through all three of those lenses in general.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think and usually in my experience anyway, which is why I put all these together, like when you leave out one of those that you're talking about, like this is why people get, the symptoms come back or they go away for a little bit or they don't like totally go away or, they come back with the same symptoms come back. I would love to hear, because like you made a point just then and you said, when we're addressing things, we're addressing the physical body, right? And that's because that's what's affecting us, right? Like, and that's what we're feeling the most is the physical things. It's my theory, my take on this and kind of how I approach this and my practice is once the physical body, like that's the last piece, the last domino to fall is the physical body. Like the emotional, energetic things have been going on for a while and the physical body is the last thing to kind of like get your attention. Like, hey, so for you mentioned in your own journey, you kind of had these health things and kind of the third thing that you experienced was kind of adding these kind of emotional, energetic pieces. So for you, was there a moment where you're like, oh, I've been leaving these things out. Now I want to bring them in. Was there what was the catalyst for you to approach it from that part, that side?
Well, they were getting piecemealed in throughout. So it was just that I did a more significant deep dive in inner healing in the last like year and a half to 2 years. But before that, fortunately, I was doing other things accidentally that were helping, of course. And so when I first started getting coaching for myself, which was like coaching and therapy are sort of run parallel to each other, but it's essentially inventory of thoughts, feelings, et cetera, that basic physiology. I do find that is like what happens very often for a lot of humans. And hopefully everyone can resonate with this is like, you can't even feel, right? Like you become numb to feeling. That happens a lot, I think, with a lot of medical practitioners working in conventional care. And something I wanted to give an acknowledgement to and a shout out to is nurses. Those particular clients have the highest pain tolerance for their symptoms. They're like, they write them out and they're like, ooh, I don't know. It doesn't feel that bad. It's like, I know, because you are working with like people seriously ill in the hospital, but like you deserve to put your own oxygen mask on first. It just routinely, they are the struggle ones, for sure. Anyway, I'm not sure how I got on that tangent, but my point is coaching. And so that physiology, thoughts, feelings, etc. I don't know if I started doing that the first time. It feels like 2018, 2019 was the very beginning of that. And I remember going through, I think it was, I remember, and it was like a friend and colleague who was doing the coaching. I think we did about, I don't know, 3 or 6 months. And I just remember after that point, I had many colleagues that were like, oh, you are different, because I was we were like talking through all the things that were taking up that hamster wheel space in my brain every day. And I had somewhere to talk through it and then get quick resolution around it. I think that's the thing about coaching then versus sometimes therapy. You talk about it. And I think it's really, for sure, I think generally it's changing to an extent. But again, sometimes my understanding of therapy is you can just talk through it sometimes, but with coaching, there tends to be a shift that's happening as well. So anyway, I did that for 3 or 6 months around 2018. That was dramatic and wonderful. Then somewhere between like 2020, 2021, I did that again. And then I was doing my high achieving things, entrepreneur things in masterminds. And I was in a mastermind where it wasn't a very good mastermind, but the best part about it was that we were doing monthly breath work. And when we would go to live retreats, we were doing breath work, and I had never really done that in this way before. So I always joke that I got kind of tricked into doing that at that time. And it was, especially in a live, and this is when I've hosted retreats and facilitated breath work. That's the end point, is like, it was such a shift for me. So one, it was like I had such great experiences with that as a modality that I went on and got certified in it. And it was really an interesting juxtaposition for me at the time, because I couldn't go from clinical back-to-backs into facilitating that. I had to kind of like shift into the better version of me, right, in order to do those facilitation. And so that was an interesting experience. I think I did that in early 2022. And here we are in early 2026. The time is flying. So that is like, feels bizarre that it's been that long. So that was really beautiful and wonderful. And then the last year and a half, I went into some big inner healing stuff, which was lovely and beautiful, plus a whole nother year of coaching. So I share that. I love to be like super transparent always. And I think sometimes I know as a high achiever, I always hated the concept of doing inner work, because it just felt like forever and there would never be an end to it and whatnot. Yeah. And it's like, you just take pieces at a time was the point of that story. It was like, there's just pieces at a time. Like, you identify the part that's consuming the most brain space right now, and you go in with that in mind first, right? You go in with that in mind, you start to address that, and then you can peel off another piece. And I don't mean this positively or negatively, because I think a lot of high achievers, like, we actually would say that we love growth. We love personal growth. We love to improve. And so why are we trying to just get to an end point of something that will always improve? Right? It's like, oh, do I actually not want to continue to improve myself as a human in my wisdom and whatever? Like, the answer to that is no. And so I just go in and get what I came for, right, as much as possible in those experiences. And, I joke, I was in a not amazing mastermind, but what did I get out of it? I got great community. I got this exposure to breathwork. So of course, it's like, if I got nothing else out of it, then it was worth it for those reasons, right?
For sure.
Sometimes life gives you what you need at that time.
Yep.
Right.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's a great, and I think so many of us, it's like the inner work and the emotional stuff and the energetic stuff is the last piece, because that's the piece that doesn't always have those like really tangible results. It's like you said before with the labs, like, we want to get the lab, and we do the lab, and you do the protocol, and then you do the retest, and you get to see what changed. And now, yes, there are some times when the inner work has some sort of tangible thing, but sometimes it's not. It's like these invisible things going on behind the scenes that we can't always like touch or identify or put language to. And I think that can be a hard thing as a high achiever, when you're like, I want to check the box and I want to get the validation that I did the thing and I finished the thing and I accomplished, so I think how you explain it just then was so perfect, because it is just finding one little piece at a time and not trying to like put the whole puzzle together all at once.
Yeah. You won't get it all at once, because life is a little bit cooler than that and more complex than that in general.
Thank God.
But the good news is, it's funny because like for quite a while, I would say for a year or 18 months or so, at one point I said, oh, I'm looking for like the modality that will help my clients really break through in that arena.
Yeah.
And what I landed on was like, I ended up providing and facilitating and sharing with clients just what I loved, because I tried a lot of modalities and there's lots of things that you can do and that's fine. But I ended up bringing to them what I loved because that makes the most sense, right? When there's so many options, it's like, hey, you can tap into this or not. But what I will share with you, and the only reason it's really relevant to bring this up is sometime last year, right around this time last year, I went all in and said, so about 2.5 years ago, I started doing coaching like a la carte a little bit with clients. And I really only had like a little bit of time I could give them, right? I was like, I got a little hour here and a little hour here. And so people like they can opt in to do these sessions. And when they did them, that was so awesome and whatnot. And so my sorrow was if people could access this more often, they could get better results. And so about a year ago, I kind of like went all in on restructuring things so I could make it available more often. And it is like beautiful because so often we come in and we think our question is nutritional or physiological or physical. And it's like, oh, that's not a physical question. That's just fear. That's just worry. That's just overwhelm. Right. Those are actually emotional things that we need to identify and accept and process. And when we do that, then we'll get where we want with physical stuff. Right. And so, and it was it's such a dramatic thing to be able to separate those and say like, hey, I know you think this is a physiology question, but it's not really. It's kind of indirectly physiology. Right. So let's go ahead and separate those two. And I'll give you the answer for the physiology over here. But I want you to know this answer over here. And since I started doing that, it's just like night and day. Like I'm so much happier in practice as well, because one, you can get kind of an instant result with that as well. Like you can instantly feel better. With that, which is really beautiful. And two, it helps get us, remember I said, like when we got all this stuff operating as the soundtrack, it's not great for our physiology. And so I've seen these like really incredible changes. And I mean, it only took like almost 10 years to get to this point, right? But so if someone can pick up on that sooner, but as a medical professional, like I am a classically trained medical professional before I did a lot of my own training stuff that started 10 years ago. And so we have to kind of put these pieces together as we go, and medically, it's like, don't expect your providers to naturally have these skills. A lot of times you have to assemble a whole care team around that. And that's okay. So I just shared that because it's just how it is. That's not what we're taught. We're taught physiology and anatomy, biology, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think it is valuable to understand that piece and to also be able to like empower yourself, like you said, to put together the team, like putting all the pieces together. And sometimes that does require multiple practitioners and multiple different areas and all those things. So I love that. I think this is such an important conversation, putting all the pieces together and really understanding what's happening in our bodies with this stress. I have one more question that I want to ask you that I like to ask everybody as we wrap up. But before I ask you that, what would be something you would want to leave women with that are listening, the high achiever that has maybe normalized the stress and is in this place that we're talking about where it's like, okay, like I can say no more. Like this is the year I say no more and I'm going to, tackle it and get under control, all that.
Well, there's a couple of things I would say. The first thing is kind of something I want to say is that you always have options. Always. I don't really believe anyone's ever out of options. And so if you're not finding an answer, someone probably can help you put together those pieces. The other thing is more of a tangible exercise that I am obsessed with as your peer, as someone listening, is that a lot of times we have a lot going on up in our brain and we're like doing a lot of things because we think we have to do them. And so one of my favorite exercises I recommend doing every month, and it can take 3 minutes, just putting on a song in the background, but just drawing a line down on a piece of paper and on one side writing everything that's like draining my energy right now and I hate and I dread and I'm not enjoying. The other side is like what fills my cup. And when you first start to do this, the energy vampire side, the draining side, is going to be a lot longer than the what's filling my cup. And the only way that this could go off, or I would just encourage you to directly find someone to work with, is if you felt that there's nothing you could do about the side that's the energy vampire, that the side that's draining you, because you should be able to look at that list and see, well, that's ridiculous. Like, why am I even doing that? Right.
Yeah.
Because very often the challenges with stress stuff and stress relief and all these things, it's like we're looking to add in the thing that will fix us stress wise. And it's like, Well, first of all, we need to check in with capacity. And capacity, that's kind of like having a really full plate and just adding more crap to it. And it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing these anti-stress things, but I feel more overwhelmed. It's like, yeah, that's not working. Like, let's not do that. So let's find some space first for whatever it is that you need. I don't know, for whatever it is that actually gives you joy. How about that? Like, let's just start with that. This is actually my definition of balance. It's the most practical exercise I've gotten to that helps with that. And it's a beautiful transformational exercise. And I've done it many, many, many times over years. And now I can write down. It's like, you can have so much gratitude for the past version of you that's walked through discomfort, because when you do that and you make shifts, sometimes it takes a while to get the fruit of those shifts.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so I'm thankful right now for the fruit I am eating right now that I painfully cultivated over the last year, right? Past person. And that's just how it is. It just starts with little shifts right now, but that's a very tangible 3-minute exercise I think anyone could do. And again, the only way it can turn out wrong is if you think there's nothing you can do about the energy vampire side. And if you think that, then it's really a good idea to get some help with it.
I love that. Such an easy practice. That's so helpful and tangible. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So good. The last question I want to ask you, I'd like to ask everybody, is what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Honestly, I think this is like a beautiful, wonderful question. There was a guy I used to follow on Instagram, and his whole thing was like pursuing purpose. And I think that when we feel out of alignment with purpose in general, we can feel a lot of desolation in our lives. So I remember reading this book by Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap. I got it as a gift from a mentor when I was starting to run retreats. And I felt very convicted when I was reading it, because he was talking about zone of excellence versus zone of genius. And zone of excellence is where you kind of go to die because you're good at something and people want you to do it forever. And I was like, oh, that was me. I was living in my zone of excellence, especially as an achiever. Like, I was just kind of results conscious, but not really excellent conscious. And so I only share this because I think that the purpose evolves over time. And I think that we don't always have to have it figured out, and we can be walking toward purpose, or we can feel pretty aligned in general. And I still think that the exercise I just offered is a roadmap, it's a helpful tool toward purpose. Like, I don't know I don't remember the exact question, Hope, but it was like, what can you do or anyone do, toward living in their purpose?
Yeah.
I think really the first step of anything better is asking good questions, answering good open-ended questions, and having good self-awareness and assessment. I think assessment and awareness are always the first step around anything. And really that exercise I gave is really an exercise in self-awareness and assessment as well.
Yeah. I love that. It's a beautiful answer. Thank you, Christa. That was amazing. Such an insightful answer. Links to connect with Christa will be in the show notes. You can go give her a follow and check out what she's doing. If you want to work with her and see what she's doing, go check that out. Thank you for hanging out with us today, Christa, and just sharing your insight and your wisdom. This has been such a perfect conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Hope.